Jay Garner is the president of Garner Economics, and he is a founding member of the Site Selectors Guild. Site selectors are the professional consultants that work with companies around the nation to help them determine where their new locations are going to be. He's here today to help us understand what's driving economic development in the country. Got a little fact about Jay Garner that you wouldn't know. He is a jazz drummer, and he's very proficient at it. So with that, I'd like to welcome Jay Garner to the stage. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, hello. It is Josh, thank you for that. It was an introduction that did not sound like my obituary. So I appreciate it. You don't know how happy I am to be in Galveston. I was flying in last night, and you had a line of storms that moved in, and so we got diverted to New Orleans late in the evening, and I thought, man, I do not want to drive 6 hours to Galveston. But the pilot came through, and with a couple of prayers, here I am in beautiful Galveston. So it's great to be with you all. Let me ask all of the elected officials in the room to stand up for me. I want to see the elected officials that are in the room for a second. All right, thank you all. Thank you all for your participation. And I'm glad to see that some of you are here because I happen to think that your role as a policymaker, you are the most important person in the economic development process. And I think my friend Michelle Hunley with CenterPoint Energy would agree with me on that because she happens to be the Director of Legislative Affairs for CenterPoint Energy. So now I want to ask a question. I'm going to single out one particular elected official who I got to meet earlier, Representative Terry Leo Wilson. Terry, I saw you, so there you are. Okay. Thank you for indulging me in this. I'm going to ask you a question. Before you answer it, I'm going to give you 5 different options to answer. Now, I'm going to incentivize you to answer the question correctly. Josh mentioned that I am a jazz drummer. I am. I have been doing the economic development world for 4+ decades. But I've been a drummer for over 50 years, and I'm in a big band jazz orchestra in the Atlanta area called the Southern Airs. And, you know, we all have a brand, whether you like it or not. A community has a brand, an individual has a brand. And goodness gracious, I've had to remake my brand for years, but I am known by my peers and colleagues as a jazz drummer. So instead of giving out business cards, I give out my own customized drumsticks. Are you a drummer?
No, but I want one.
Oh, well,
I want one. I'm a former teacher, and I like free stuff.
Well, if you're not a drummer, they're still good for capital punishment.
Are they signed by you?
They are signed.
Awesome.
Yeah, they are signed. So I'm going to ask a question, and hopefully you're going to answer it correctly. So, and I want you all to answer it along too, and see if she gets the same answer as you all do. What do you consider is the most important ingredient to economic development success? Now, do you think it is incentives, the opportunity to incentivize a company to locate in a state or a community? It's all important. You have federal incentives, you have state incentives, you have local incentives. Do you think it's talent? Labor is very important. And a lot of companies are always looking at talent as the key consideration. Do you think it's product, which are your sites and buildings? You've got to have something to sell, right? So sites and buildings are important. Do you think it's your nice downtown? The charm factor is extremely important in the economic development process. You probably talked about that earlier today. Or Do you think it's leadership? Your answer?
Leadership.
Leadership is correct. Give her a hand. It is leadership. Now, why is it leadership? Because the quality of your public and private leadership drives economic development success. Quality leadership drives economic development to a community. Poor leadership drives economic development out of a community. It's the common denominator wherever we go in seeing those communities that are succeeding and those communities that are not. Because with effective leadership, Representative, you achieve all of those other necessary factors that we listed before. So, leadership is exactly right. Any Texas A&M fans in here? Only a few? Wow, well look, it's football season, and I am a fan of college football, and I have to use the proverbial football metaphor, which we say, stay in the game. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, A&M currently has a record of 8-0. It didn't used to be that way just a few years ago, right? You all remember when it wasn't. But you're doing great now. So, you stayed in the game. You made adjustments to be competitive once again. My beloved Mountaineers of West Virginia are 2-6. We're not doing well, but we have a new coach. He's coming back. We're making adjustments, and we'll be back once again. Your economic development efforts will need to make adjustments too, based on global and local economic conditions. So, what do we mean by stay in the game? Well, show up. Respond to those requests for information that these consultants and these companies send out asking for information regarding your community. Be proactive. This is a relationship business. Develop and nurture those relationships. Joshua does this exceptionally well. I see Joshua working the room at Site Selector Guild events, promoting Galveston. So he's doing his job effectively and making you proud. And remember, your website is your #1 marketing tool. Make sure it is designed to answer questions of your customers. Have data that means something, like tax, incentive, tourism data, sites and buildings, occupational data. Remember that site selectors are really site eliminators. Don't give them a reason to eliminate you or your community early in the process if business attraction is important to your efforts. Now, in my book, this is my shameless plug, Economic Development is Not for Amateurs. Chapter 2 of our book is a signature chapter called No Product, No Project, and it's a registered trademark of Garner Economics because it is so meaningful. What do we mean by no product, no project? Well, you cannot sell from an empty wagon. All the economic developers that are in this room, Lance, Joshua, others that are in this room, they all know that you cannot sell from an empty wagon. Spec buildings are a plus to attract prospect activity, but they come with a risk. I've seen a lot of spec buildings that have been taken up, acquired, before the steel has already gone up, especially during or shortly post-COVID. And I've seen a spec building that stayed on the market for 12 years. 12 years. And the Industrial Development Board had to eat that debt service for a long time, but it was poorly designed in a bad location. So you've got to do your market analysis. At the very least, you need a fully developed business park. Why? Because the entity that controls the dirt controls the project. The entity that controls the dirt controls the project. That's why site selection consultants like me really like it when there's a municipally owned or a not-profit owned industrial or business park, because that entity is more involved or engaged in job creation and capital investment, rather than a private developer who's in business to make a profit, as they should. So having that kind of product will allow you to see projects. Now, creating a long-term funding source for economic development project is an absolute recipe for success. And Texas is the absolute champion of that with their Type A and Type B funding models. Galveston is a Type B community. 1979, the Texas legislature said, we think local communities can do a better job in economic development than we, the state, telling you how to do it. And they were right. And so for almost 20 years, Texas has led the nation in job creation and capital investment. And I venture to say the main reason for that is because so many of those communities, over 600 municipalities in Texas, are either Type A, Type B, or some even have both funding models. It's been copied by a number of municipalities around the country, but no state has gotten close to copying it like Texas has. So, for my state legislature friends, Representative Wilson, you need to do what you can to protect that Type A and Type B funding every time the legislature is in session. So, another mantra in our book and that we use is talent is the new currency. And here we are in an academic institution that helps educate and train people for the workforce. So why is this important? Well, obviously, every company has to have a talent component. And even as they transition because of less people in the workforce to AI, you still have to have people who manage the AI components of a business. So, in the long term, we have a changing age demographic in the United States, which is even a more emphasis on the talent pipeline. There's fewer births and an aging population. Look at this slide. If you can see that. The median age in the U.S. is 39. Now, when I got into this business a while back, the median age was 32. So we've gone from 32 to 39. Japan has the oldest median age in the world at 50. And then Italy, Germany. Germany is soon going to reach Japan because they're not having babies in Germany either. So China, a year older than us, China made a huge mistake years ago when they had the one-child policy. Then they realized they made a mistake about 5 years, 6 years into that. They tried to reverse it. They tried to incentivize families to have babies, but now there's far more many males than there are females in China. So you have that issue. If I was the person in charge of business development for the state of Texas, and I know that person, I'd be fishing in those ponds that have no labor. Japan, Korea, Germany. And then, of course, you have our biggest competition, labor-wise, with Mexico at the median age of 31, and India with the median age of 30. And by the way, if you're interested in knowing, if you want to play trivia, at some bar, you maybe get this question asked of you, what is the median age in Texas? It is lower than the U.S. Median age in Texas is 35.8. Louisiana, who you compete with, according to Joshua, is 38.4. And Alabama, who you compete with, is 39.4. If you're interested in knowing what state has the oldest age, anyone guess?
North Dakota?
Not Florida, but that's a good guess. That's a good guess. Remember, a lot of younger people have moved to Florida too, like they have from Texas, okay? The state with the oldest age is Maine. Maine. A lot of old people in Maine. What's the state with the youngest age? Utah is correct. I don't have another set of drumsticks to give you. Utah has the youngest age at 32. 32. So that gives you an idea. And remember, investment follows talent. So you don't see a whole lot of investment in Maine. You see a lot of investment in Texas. You see a lot of investment in Florida. And Utah's doing pretty darn good. So let's talk about marketing. Marketing is very important. So companies look at regions first because of the labor draw. Then they focused on the real estate, which is local. So the transaction is always local. That's why we say you market regionally, you sell yourself locally. Market regionally, sell yourself locally. How your geography is perceived is the foundation of your total economic development efforts. So most times there's a difference between your brand and your identity. There's a difference between the two, brand and identity. So I'll give you an example. New Orleans, their brand for years has been the Big Easy, the Crescent City, Jazz. That's their brand. Their identity is, up until this year, they were the murder capital of the U.S. And a lot of potential investors recognized that. St. Louis was number 2. Okay? Then you have New York. What's their brand? I love New York. There's a lot of people who don't like New York. That's their brand. What's their identity? Well, crime, homelessness, high taxes, high cost. That's their identity. Chicago, the Windy City. They have supplanted New Orleans now as the murder capital of the U.S. So the people in New Orleans are saying, thank God for Chicago. So Portland, what's their brand? The brand, City of Roses. What's their identity? Ground zero for Antifa. Austin, they took a different approach years ago with their brand of Keep Austin Weird. And by and large, it has worked. I mean, you know, for certain cities, that's fine. Now, I'll never forget, anybody ever been to Bastrop, Texas? Okay. Well, I was doing a project in Bastrop some years back, and I was interviewing one of the HR directors in Bastrop, and I said, describe Bastrop to me. And she said, east of weird. I loved it. I thought it was great. You know, so, and then you have Nashville. My children, my grandchildren all live in Nashville. What's their brand? Music City, USA. But their other brand is they are now the bachelorette capital of the U.S. And they have supplanted Las Vegas for that. Now, what does that mean in terms of identity? Their city council, because they have metro government in Nashville, they have 34 members of their city council, 34 members. They are laser focused on keeping the lower Broadway, that's where all the honky-tonks are, safe. safe because they don't want to kill that brand of being Music City, USA, and the bachelorette capital of the U.S. because those bachelorettes spend a lot of money. And the Uber drivers hate them. They've told me that. But outside of that, they spend a lot of money. So they don't want to change that. Now, I'll give you one last example. Anybody ever been to Minot, North Dakota? Minot, there's an Air Force base there. A few of you have. So it's cold. It's cold in Minot. But there are people who like Minot. But it's cold. So the Chamber of Commerce years ago came up with a brand, a slogan that said, "Why not Minot?" And somebody very cleverly said, as soon as it came out, "Reason, freezing." Killed it. Killed the brand. So tourism is economic development, and Galveston has a great tourism brand, but tourism helps create that identity, like I mentioned with Nashville. All of Florida recognizes the value of that tourism brand. And then you have places that have gone sideways with it. Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, which has some comparisons to Galveston, and where I used to spend some time as the head of the Chamber of Commerce back in the 90s, Asheville, North Carolina. Both of them, both Myrtle Beach and Asheville, had terrific brands, but crime has upset both of those brands considerably. Lot of media attention, lot of national media attention. So the moral to that story is, do not take your eye off the ball. Make sure that you protect the brand. Let's talk about how Texas competes. Now, Josh would ask me to do some benchmarking of Texas to Louisiana and Alabama because you compete with those states on projects. And back also in the 80s and 90s, I was the head of economic development in Mobile. And we would compete with the Houston region, Galveston County, often on some of the more resource-intensive projects, you know. So I'm not surprised when Joshua said that you're competing a lot with Louisiana and Alabama. Now, before I get into some benchmarking, let me show you this slide. It's hard to see, but I'll walk you through it. From Area Development Magazine. Area Development Magazine surveys companies every year, and they ask them, what's important to you in the economic development process? What's important to you? Kind of the same question that I asked Representative Wilson, but they didn't get drumsticks. And the number one consideration were labor costs, okay? Look at number two, quality of life. Quality of life. Now, they call it quality of life. I call it quality of place, because quality of life is subjective. Minot, North Dakota is an example of that. I don't want to live in Minot, but there's a lot of people who do. Quality of place, you can measure, because it's everything from public safety to your arts and recreation, cultural nuances, taxes, and so forth. All of that can be measured. Everything that I have highlighted, everything is a cost consideration. Cost. So cost is still key when companies make a decision. Now, I want to point that out because I want to hit on a couple of different things that will make you think a little bit differently when you see some of these magazine rankings that come out, that we're the best this and we're the best that, okay? This is not a ranking. This is a survey from the customers, people who are investing in your community. Let's talk a little bit about the Tax Foundation. Now, I like this rating and ranking because it's not subjective. It's entirely analytical, quantitative, based on taxes that each state and their legislatures have voted to assess their citizens. So people like me take a lot of this with, for the Tax Foundation with a lot of credence. Tax Foundation says you rank number 7 overall in the tax climate. And compare that to Alabama at 38 and Louisiana at 40. Now, what comprises the taxes that the Tax Foundation uses? Well, they look at your corporate tax rate, which you don't do so well in. You rank 46. They look at individual income tax, which you do look very well in. You rank number 1. And then sales tax is 36. Property tax is 40, and unemployment insurance is 40. Is 30. Now, I want you to look at, and then I want you to hold that thought, I want you to look at where Minnesota is at 44, California at 48, New York at 50, and New Jersey at 49. So hold that thought, okay? Because I want you to look at this slide. This is from CNBC. And this is why I don't like some of these ratings and rankings. Now, CNBC has an author who has come up with these rankings and a team of writers. And so a lot of what they do is, in my opinion, subjective. And I tell my corporate clients, don't pay any attention to this kind of stuff. You know, U.S. News and World Report has something similar and others. This doesn't matter because this is written by a writer who I guarantee you has some form of bias. So, Texas is ranked 2. Well, that's good. They can have all the bias they want as long as you rank good. Alabama at 19 and Louisiana at 46. But look at Minnesota. They rank 10, California 22, New York 23, New Jersey at 30. Now, I've worked all over the U.S. I've worked in almost every state but 2. And I can tell you that the business climate in California, New York, New Jersey, Minnesota is not better than the business climate of Louisiana. So this is why I don't give a whole lot of credence to this. Now let me go to this last one. This one's going to be hard to see, but I'll walk you through it. This one is better because once again, Chief Executive Magazine is asking 600 and some odd companies their opinions of every state. So it's an opinion survey from your customer, not from some biased writer. And they rank Texas as number 1, not a shock, Louisiana at 27, and Alabama at 24. Look at California, 50, New York, 49, Illinois, 48, New Jersey, 46. So, the moral of this story is if you're ranked well, exploit it. If you're not, forget it. Don't worry about it. Unless it's the Tax Foundation or Chief Executive Magazine, then it's a different story. Okay? Well, how's Galveston County doing? Well, I think you're doing well. So, last year alone, you've had a population change. You know, there's 3,141 counties in the U.S. There's 19,000 municipalities. There's 90,000 tax jurisdictions. But remember, there's 3,141 counties, okay? So many of those counties have had population losses. That's a red flag. You have not. You've had an increase. Houston Metro has had an increase. Your job growth is greater than the Houston Metro. Your manufacturing growth, percentage-wise, is greater than the Houston Metro. Bottom line is you have a lot to celebrate. You have a lot of good stuff going on. So keep that momentum going. You're like Texas A&M football, right? Y'all miss Jimbo Fisher? I heard Lane Kiffin on ESPN being interviewed about, all the coaches changes, and he said, people think you got to spend all that money, but now look, and they don't think it's a good idea at the time until you have a winning season. Then they think it's a great investment, So keep the momentum up. I bet earlier today when you all had some discussions with the mayor and the city manager and others, you talked about quality of place, which is what we call in our book the charm factor. So quality of place matters. Remember, it's the second most important consideration in that area development survey by companies when they are seeking a location. This is salesmanship 101. If your community makes it to like phase 2 or phase 3, when companies and consultants are actually in your community doing more due diligence, this is your time to shine. It's when the charm factor comes into play. It's not just about having the right data and resources, but about making a great first impression, or second or third. Get your litter picked up, the grass mowed, put a smile on your face. I'll never forget this. Has anybody been to the rental car, well, it was the Hertz rental car facility when you go off the Houston Hobby Airport? I remember I had a project, and I brought my client with me, and it was maybe 5 or 6 months into COVID. And I remember getting into the car, and we were driving in the summer. The highway department was cutting the median grass while all this litter was on the median. And so all the litter exploded exponentially. And my client said they just must not think well enough about their community to do that kind of stuff. When I was an economic developer, I always would call the mayor or the county commission chair or somebody like that before a prospect visit to say, hey, can you send a crew to go pick up the trash in this route before we start taking people around? And they did. So it's the little things. The little things make a difference. Details make the difference. So get that litter picked up, get that grass mowed, put a smile on your face. Your central business district is the living room of your community. Make sure that you do have someone in your downtowns that are focused on the day-to-day health and vibrancy of your central business district. What do we mean by time kills deals? Well, in most instances, local government can be the greatest bottleneck of time for investment. So if you remember in the area development survey, speed to market ranked number 3 and 15 respectively. So speed is important. I remember when Tesla announced their Cybertruck facility in South Travis County. From the time of the announcement till the time they turned dirt was about 15 days. 15. That would have never happened in Alston, but they made it happen in Travis County. So you've got to remember that it's extremely important to be responsive. And so there's 3 tenets to when we say time kills deals, and that is certainty, simplicity, and speed. And what we mean by that is there's certainty in the permitting process, or is some building inspector going to change something on a whim? I've seen that happen plenty of times. Speed, how long does it take to get that permit turned around, and how difficult or simple is to make it happen? if you adopt certainty, simplicity, and speed in your regulatory process, you'll be a winner. Regulations are important, but they must be continually improved and reassessed. And remember, environmental regulations ranked high on that area development survey about how difficult, how onerous it would be to deal with that. Planners, I'm a reformed planner. Planners are regulators. You need them. You've got to have someone to help protect the environment. But economic developers are doers. The two need to work in sync to achieve a positive outcome. So for my elected official friends that are in the room, help to create a culture of yes rather than a culture of no. Now, here's my last trivia question for you. Anyone know what band this is? Anyone? Who? You know, I've heard more people say Casey and the Sunshine Band, and that is incorrect because there are no Caucasians in the Casey and the Sunshine Band. Well, there is. There's one. I've heard people say Doobie Brothers. Somebody was smoking dope, and they said it was the Temptations. So this was my favorite band in the 70s, Tower of Power. Tower of Power. Now, I like Tower of Power because they are a jazz fusion band, so it's sort of jazz and funk. And they've been around since the 70s. This is what they look like today. Some of them have aged better than others. Why am I talking about Tower of Power? Well, they had a hit song in the 70s called What is Hip? And there's a line from their lyric called What's hip today might become passé. And that's my brilliant way to transition to trends and fads in the economic development targets that are out there. So this is where you should be focused on now. Let's talk about sustainable trends. Whoops, I went too fast. Sustainable trends. These are trends that have legs. They're going to be around for a while. So I have all things healthcare. All things healthcare. And then right under that, I have pickleball, sports tourism. Now, why do I have those two together? Because, well, first of all, sports tourism is a $650 billion industry. $650 billion. But in 2024, there were $400 million spent on orthopedic procedures related to pickleball. I had two of them. So obviously they correlate. AI, defense spending is going to be huge for the next somewhere between 4 and 8 years at least. Microchips, cybersecurity, hybrid autos versus EVs, and battery storage. Let's talk about a forced trend. A forced trend, or as the World Bank calls it, an anti-competitive market distortion, which is what the IRA was, the Inflation Reduction Act. That was throwing money at an industry sector or sectors because that's what government wanted to do. They were trying to pick winners. They turned out not to be winners. So anything that has federal subsidies and credits, EVs are going in the opposite direction, batteries related to just EVs, energy development heavily subsidized by the feds, such as wind and solar, I wouldn't bank on it. And then lastly, on fads, the Amazon H2Q type of beauty contests you won't see anymore. FDI recruitment from certain countries like the BRIC countries Russia, China. China projects will still be, I think, accepted in certain blue states like Michigan and California, Illinois, but in most others they won't be. And then work from home. For you office developers that are in the room, God bless you for making it to this point, because hopefully work from home will continue to be less working from home. Let me finish up with a quote from Jack Welch, who is the late, great Jack Welch, who was the chairman of GE when GE was a well-run company. And he said, "Control your own destiny or someone else will." And what do we mean by that? Well, you work in collaboration, but don't rely solely on others to shape the destiny of your community. With adversity comes opportunity. Change is a constant, and embrace it to flourish, but don't chase a fad. If it doesn't feel right to you, it probably isn't. So don't chase it. And as an elected official or a policymaker that may be in the room, you have an awesome responsibility. Remember, quality leadership drives economic development to a community. So, be courageous, be transformative, be innovative, keep leading, and make that difference today. So thank you all very much for having me. I appreciate it. Let me, if you haven't had a chance to look at our book, Economic Development is Not for Amateurs, I appreciate Joshua plugging that in his earlier email transmissions. And I know Josh wants to take a couple of questions, and so I think you're supposed to scan.
If you could scan in your questions now.
Okay.
While they're scanning and then asking their questions, I'm going to take my privilege and ask you a question, Jay. We learn so much more from our failures than we do our successes. Can you give us some more examples of communities and how they fumbled at the goal line on some economic development projects?
Well, that's a great question. There's a number of communities. There's a friend of mine that was competing for a huge couple $billion-dollar pharmaceutical plant in northeast Pennsylvania. And they lost it to the Richmond, Virginia area. The folks in the economic development group really did everything right. It came down to, do we want the Virginia business climate or do we want the Pennsylvania business climate? I don't think that was a wise decision at that time because, and this is recent, because in Virginia compared to, say, Texas, the gubernatorial term is only for 4 years. They can't run for re-election. So Governor Youngkin can't run for re-election. And Virginia has gone from my days, they've gone from red to purple to blue to purple, and next week's election they'll probably go blue again. But Pennsylvania, outside of the governor, has a red legislature. So every community is unique in how they lose a project, and it's a heartbreaker, when you spend months, sometimes years, on working a project. But business climate matters. So focus on local and state business climate issues. All right, Josh, what you got?
That's it, Jay. You're too good. You answered all your questions.
All
We
right.
need to go ahead and bring UTMB up. Thank you so much, Jay.
Thank
that was
you
an
all.
excellent presentation.
Thank you.